Hello, welcome back to another episode from Pale Horse Survival and Tactical. I'm Bill, glad you could join me. In this episode, we're processing acorns. Stay tuned. Okay, so I brought some acorns up here. I've actually had these for over a year. And acorns can remain viable for quite a long time. There are two different types of acorns here. These are bur oak acorns, also called mossy cup because of the large cap. It's kind of fuzzy and mossy looking. And I have some valley oak acorns, Quercus lobata, and those have small caps. Acorns will remain viable for quite some time in the shell. They'll store, as long as they're kept dry, they'll keep for a year or longer, as long as they don't get wet and go moldy. I have quite a few in the bag here. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to shell these. Some of the shells are already cracked. You can see these are already oxidized and brown. They oxidize when the nut meat is exposed to the oxygen. They oxidize just like a sliced apple or banana, avocado, raw potatoes. How they'll turn dark. So they turn brown. I've even seen them turn black like this. And they're still good. As long as they're not moldy or they have mold or fuzz growing on them. Now, the main rule in regards to the tannin content, because we have to leach these. So the larger the cap, the lower the tannin content. The smaller the cap, the higher the tannin content. All acorns contain tannins, and tannins, tannic acid, is it's harmful to the kidneys. So it'll give you kidney damage if you ingest enough of it, and it's also very toxic to the gastrointestinal tract. So before we eat acorns, we have to leach them. Now, when you pick acorns up, you want to pick up ones that are brown. It should be this color. And if they're green, you can just set them aside and they will turn brown. But when they're the brown is the best color. And what we have to do is crack these. I'm going to grab a stone here. Alright, apologies for that. I should have brought my pencil to class. So when we crack acorns, you want to put the blunt side down, pointed side up, and if they're dry, they'll crack pretty good. See, these I'm just squeezing and they're breaking, but you want to hit them on the pointy end and they'll split just like that. And when you get the nut meat open, you want to inspect it. Make sure everything doesn't look rotted on the inside, because these can get weevils as well. That's a healthy nut meat. That's just aged. Had these for a little over a year. Now sometimes you're going to find one that has a hole in it. A little tiny hole like that, and that is an acorn weevil. One whack. I'm going to show you, it's going to be about probably half of your acorns. Now this one here, the weevil got it. Now you can still, if you cut the bad part off and save the good part, you can still salvage that and eat it. I wouldn't eat the section that's spoiled. But the weevils will bore into the shell, and then they ingest the nut on the inside. And then they leave the shell after a while and they form a cocoon. And so you just cut the bad part off and the rest of this is still good. Now the weevils, if you run across live weevils, they are edible. Either raw or cooked. See, when you hit it, splits longitudinally. And that is a nice healthy golden colored nut. That's what it should look like on the inside. That's just oxidation. I don't have a whole lot here, and some of these are going to be ruined by the weevils. Weevils also, so it splits right down the center, one whack. When they're fresh, the shells are pliable and they're not going to split like that. So when you gather up your acorns, and this is a healthy looking nut meat, I want to open it up here. There we go. Just have a look at the inside. It's another very healthy nuts there. When you gather up your nuts, you can place them in a bucket of water. The ones that sink are the good ones. They don't have weevils inside. If they float, they're no good. That's one very easy way to weed out the good from the bad. Now you want to dry these. I hear people complaining there's a membrane that is on a fresh acorn. It's on the outside of the nut meat, and a lot of people crack these before they're dry, and then they complain that they have to go and spend a lot of time peeling that. It's called the test in botanical terms, and it's a membrane. It's brown, and it is contains a lot of tannins. The way you're supposed to do these is once you harvest your acorns, spread them out on a sheet in your garage or out in the sun. If you put them out there, the squirrels may get a few, but let them sun dry. And you know you're ready to process these when you shake the nut and you hear it rattle. The nut shrinks inside the shell, and the membrane will stick to the inside of the shell. That's the easiest way to do these. There's no reason to process these and then go through the labor of having to peel that test off. So you're getting rid of a lot of the tannins. And here is, I'll give you a close-up of this. There's the membrane right there. It's on the inside of the shell. Fresh acorns, see, there's the test. It will dry and stick to the inside of this shell, and it leaves the nut, surface of the nut. Saves you a lot of labor. Now there's two ways to leach tannins. Some people boil them. The traditional way to do it is with the cold leach method. Now the advantage of boiling is that you will be able to leach the tannins out much quicker than you would. See, now this one's no good. I'll give you a close-up here. This one had a little hole in the shell. That one had a weevil. So that's a discard. Probably when you're harvesting acorns off the ground, you're going to find it's probably about 50% on average are going to be no good. There's that little hole right there. That tells you right away there's a weevil in there. And if we put this in water, it's going to float. Remember, we put them in a bucket of water. The ones that sink, those are the good ones. See right here. That one's no good. The weevils, they are edible, raw or cooked. It's a small grub. So if you're hard up, you're in a survival situation, they are a food source that you can use. And here's another one with a hole in it. And again, that one's spoiled. We could probably cut the rest of the nut is good. It's just the bottom. If you're hard up for food, you can just cut the bad part off and do it. I'm probably not going to mess with it. I'll just gift the squirrels out here with the rest of these. So the grubs are edible, and they also make good squirrel bait. So if you want to bait snares, and they make fish bait as well. A little tip there. These are good ones here. I'm not processing very many. This one's really bad. That one is real bad. I'm only processing a few here for demonstration purposes. It's another rotted one. That one's no good. So the cold leach method takes longer. See, this one it's got mildew in it and mold. Don't eat those. Cold leach takes longer. The advantage is it doesn't boil the oils off. You're not cooking the oils off. And if you're in a survival situation, the fats, the valuable oils and fats, are very nutritious. So you want to preserve those. This one's really rotted here. So if you boil them, you'll find the oil. This one had a weevil. You'll find the oils will float to the top, and you can skim those off, and you'll have yourself the acorn oil. This is a perfect example of one not to try and eat. That's not good at all. So we're not going to have a lot to process here, but we're doing it for demonstration purposes, so that's okay. It's a good one. So the advantage of cold leaching, it preserves the fats, the valuable fats and the oils. And that's the method, that's a traditional method of doing it. That's how the native people processed acorns. Also, it doesn't cook the starch. If you process them with heat, you're cooking the starch. And it can't be used for baking purposes. You'll have to add a binder to it. And also when you're leaching by boiling. This one has a weevil got to this. All this discarded acorns here make good squirrel bait too, if you're baiting snares. Also, deer love these as well. Yeah, another bad one. Real bad. So if you're boiling, if you put the acorns in cold water and you bring the temperature up, what you're doing is you're binding the tannins to the starch, and you'll never be able to leach those tannins out. So if you're going to do it the hot water method, the boiling method, you want to drop the acorns directly into the boiling water. The water is going to turn the color of bourbon, the color of tea. That's the tannins that are being leached. And what you do, you got to have a second pot going. You get that boiling, you transfer your acorns out and drop them directly into that boiling water in the second pot. If you drop them into cold water and bring that temperature up, you're locking those tannins in, and you'll never be able to leach them out. I prefer the cold method, and it's more foolproof. It takes a little bit longer to process, but it retains a lot more nutritional value, and you don't run the risk of locking those tannins in. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to finish. I don't have a whole lot here to do. Boy, this one's bad. Don't eat that. I'm going to go ahead and finish processing these. It won't take too long. And then we're going to go ahead and grind these. You don't have to, but it hastens the leaching process if you can grind them down, reduce the size of the material. And we're going to go ahead and demonstrate that. I've mounted a vintage meat grinder here, and we're going to discuss this here in a little bit. And I have it mounted to my primitive workbench here. We're going to use this to grind up the nut meat in preparation for the cold leach. So stay tuned. I shall return. Alright, getting down to the last few here. Now acorns, when they are dry, the nut meat is hard as a rock. There's a few different ways you can process these. You can use a food processor. If you're in a primitive setting, you can use two big flat rocks. The problem is this meat, the nuts are so hard that they, turn the screen around here so I can see what I'm doing, that when you hit them they just kind of fly and shatter and go all over the place. So if you have like a big stone mortar and pestle, or what they call a mano metate, you can kind of contain the nut meat. A better way to do it is if you soak these in water to where they get soft but not leached, it'll be a lot easier to grind them down, and then you can go and leach that finer material. If we condense this material down, it's going to make the leaching process a lot easier. You can leach them like this, but it takes a lot longer. Native Americans would put them in a basket. One of the methods, they put them in a basket and put them in a stream where there's a bit of a water current, and just let the water current act as a natural leaching process to remove those tannins. And you'll know the tannins are gone when you can taste. You do a taste test of the acorns and they're not bitter. tannins are bitter. So if they're bitter, that's your cue that they're not fit for consumption. So let's take a quick look here at what we have. This is just for demonstration purposes. It's a fair amount. This isn't too bad. This is what they look like when they've been stored. They just oxidize. So what we're going to do here, we're going to go ahead and use this vintage. This is from the old Universal company. I like old hand tools. And the reason for that is, in an off-grid situation, grid down, societal collapse, whatever may occur, and there's no electricity, you have to fall back on the old ways of doing things. And I actually collect a certain amount of vintage hand tools, just in the event of the aforementioned. So this is an old grinder here. You can find these on eBay, and they're not very much because people don't want them. You know, everybody wants the latest electronic gadgets, but I'll tell you, when things fall apart, none of that stuff's going to work, and you're going to have to go back to the old school ways. And I like doing things by hand anyways, but I got this off eBay. I don't know how old it is. It's pretty old, and it's all cast iron. I think I paid 30 bucks for it. So what we're going to do is, these I just feed these into the grinder. And if you grind these when they're dry in one of these, I don't want this thing coming off the bench. They're going to grind down pretty fine for the most part. And when you buy something like this, be aware that these come with, I'm just going to feed these in a piece at a time. I put 3 in there, and it was a little much for it to process, as hard as these seeds are, these nuts. You buy one of these, be aware that they are supposed to come with 3 cutter blades. There's a fine, medium, and coarse. This one did. I've got the fine blade on here right now, so I want to condense this material down as fine as possible. These are called meat grinders, but they have other uses than just grinding meat. People in the old times, they would process grain with these, corn in particular. Grind the kernels through just like we're doing here and make cornmeal. And of course you can put in here, you know, off grid, you can run some venison through here and make some venison burgers. Actually sound pretty good. You know, for $30 investment, if I'm forced to go off grid, this would be a very valuable tool to have in the arsenal. Just a big labor saver. And this is doing an outstanding job of grinding these dry nuts into a fine powder. So very easy to leach these. With the cold leach method, the starches aren't cooked out of the material. The starch acts as a binder, so what I usually do, I make a Native American hot cereals, which is how they would traditionally eat this, and you prepare it just like cream of wheat, and it'll actually thicken due to the starch content, just like cream of wheat would. And it's actually really tasty. Put a little sugar pine sap in there. You can see how nice this is processing these. It's really doing an outstanding job. I highly recommend. If you're going to get serious about off-gridding or preparation in general, we're living in some pretty crazy times. Some can recognize the changes that are going on. And those of us that are aware and have taken steps to be prepared will be a lot better off than those who are not. So I'm going to go ahead. I can smell these. They have a kind of a nutty, sweet aroma to them. It's actually not bad at all. Brought up some meal here that I processed over a year ago. and as long as it's dry, it really shouldn't be stored in plastic. It should be stored in something that breathes. But it hasn't turned rancid in that amount of time, and that was cold. This was cold leached. I'm going to show you the method that I used. I call it the bowl method. Very simple to do, and by reducing down this material, it makes it a lot easier. The wind's blowing my material away here. So you can see just a small amount of acorns yields a lot of material, but remember you're looking at about a 50% loss rate due to spoilage and weevils. So if you pick up 100 pounds of acorns, just automatically assume that 50 pounds of that is going to be bad. I don't have too many left in here to go. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these up. And I shall return. Stay tuned. All right, so this is where we are. That small amount yielded quite a bit. It's a nice fine consistency. Not a single chunk in there. The grinder actually did a really good job. So these come with, I have the fine blade on the front mounted. This came with two other blades. This is the coarse, and this is the medium, and then the fine over there. So the fine really did an outstanding job on those acorns. I'll go ahead and give you a look at the grinder here. And it has a corkscrew inside, so as it's turned, it feeds everything up to the front and pushes it into these, forces it through these openings here, the blades. And to clean this, you just pull this off, and the blade comes right off the front. This whole thing dismantles. The blade comes off. This is the fine blade, so I'll pull all that apart when I get home and clean it out. And there's still some powdered material stuck up here, so I'll give it a clean up when I get home. That's how it goes on. Oh, it's falling apart on me now. This whole thing pulls out just like this. Whoop. And I got powder inside. I guess I'll pull that apart and pull the powder out. Still got some inside here that I'll dump in the bowl. So the next leg of this episode will take place at home, because I'm not going to leach them here, and I'm not going to have a bowl of water slopping around inside the vehicle. So we'll go ahead and conclude the leaching part at home, and so that'll be upcoming. Stay tuned. Okay, so I'm at home, obviously, and here is the acorn meal that we processed through the meat grinder. It's not a bad little yield for a very small amount of nuts, considering about half of those were bad. But you can see how fine that came out. Really did a nice job. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to instruct in the cold water extraction method here. And so what we're going to use here is the bowl method, and this is just a plastic bowl here. If you don't have a bowl, say you're doing this in the wilds, you can use a stream, a body of water, a lake, a pond, whatever you happen to have. Now what I use is a bandana, and you should always have a bandana or two in your kit. They serve a variety of uses. And so one use that I use them for is for leaching acorn meal, acorn tannins. So tannic acid is water soluble, and as we discussed earlier in this episode, the cold water method is a traditional method. It's what the Native Americans used. I don't boil the acorns because, as we talked about previously, it degrades the nutritional value. You lose the oil content and the fats, which are very nutritious and valuable if you're using this as a food source. So the cold water method is just a lot better. So real simple to do, amazingly simple. So we're just going to take the bandana, laid out flat as it is, take the meal, we're going to pour the meal right here in the center. Just like that. Gather the four ends together. That's a decent amount. I'm actually surprised we got that much. Gather it up. Scoop the bowl over here so I'm in frame. Gather it up and give it a few twists, and you just stick it in the water. It's going to take a bit for it to absorb the water, and this will probably take about 4 or 5 days. Now you're going to see as the tannins are leached, the water's going to turn bourbon color. It'll be tea colored, and you'll really see that by the next day. And tomorrow morning, it's the end of the day, I just got in from work, still in my work clothes, and it's been about probably 5 days since I ground up this acorn meal. So in the morning, what we're going to do, we're going to be right here again with the camera, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at this water. I can already see the water starting to turn a little darker. See, it still wants to float, so I'm still trying to get this meal saturated here. And it'll absorb the water. You can see how it's already starting to darken up. Now tomorrow morning it'll be a lot darker. We'll pull this up, we'll kind of squeeze the water out. And it's very important to change the water at least once a day, otherwise this will start to stagnate and it will, your meal will be ruined. So at least once a day, you can do it twice, and always with cold water. You don't want to set those tannins into the nut meat. That's another danger with using the hot water method. It's real easy to cook that, real easy to set that tannins into the nut meat. Once that happens, you'll never get rid of it, no matter how much leaching you do. Also, 150 degrees, the starch cooks. And the starch acts as a binder. And how I prepare mine, I make a traditional Native American hot cereal. I cook it just like cream of wheat. So I take the amount I want, I put it in a bowl after it's leached, and we're going to dry all this too, so we can store it afterwards, after it's leached. And I put it in there, and I just simmer it just like cream of wheat, for 5 minutes. 8 minutes or so. You can see how dark this is getting. That's all tannins being leached. This is just the beginning. And then once it is, you just put just enough water in there so it's not too thin and not too thick. It'll absorb some of the water, but I kind of like it a little bit on the thick side, not overly runny. But you just cook it, simmer it until it's soft. It'll soften up just like cream of wheat. And you can eat it that way. The Native Americans would eat it traditionally in that manner, and they would they would boil venison, and then they would take chunks of boiled venison and kind of scoop it into the cooked acorn meal, and that was a traditional Native American dish. You see how this is becoming very tea-colored now. So in the morning, we're going to go ahead and we'll take a look at this again, very same spot. We're going to squeeze this out, and then I'm going to dump the water. Now, the first change of water is going to contain the highest level of tannic acid. And tannic water, if you're in a primitive situation, you can save that. And it has topical uses. It's highly antibacterial, antifungal. It's also astringent, so you can use it on ringworm, nail fungus. Just soak your fingernail or toenails in the water, and it's good for fungus, jock itch, things of that nature. And do not drink it, though. It is toxic. It's very it'll produce a lot of gastrointestinal irritation, so do not ingest it. You can use it as a mouthwash. Just make sure you spit it out afterwards. It's a germ killer in that manner. Good for an infected tooth. You can use it as a body wash, antibacterial body wash. Just wash yourself down and rinse off. You can wash your hair with it. You can wash your laundry with it. It actually works really good. You can really see this is turning, and it's starting to absorb now. It's not floating. You can see how dark this is turning now. So you can save that tannic water on the first change, and if you're in a primitive situation, it's valuable in that aspect. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, basically you want to make sure your bandana, I mean you could tie a piece of cordage around here. I usually just twist it up and leave it so it's just like that, and so it's not disturbed. I'm going to put this up on a shelf. I have a Chihuahua running around, and she'll get in this and knock it over, and I don't want her drinking the tannic water. And that's another thing to be mindful of if you have pets. Make sure they don't get into that tannic water and drink it. It won't be good for them. Or even children. So put it up on a shelf or whatever. Okay, we're doing pretty good now. So now that it's absorbed, so I'm going to leave this soaking overnight. In the morning we'll come back, we'll squeeze it out, we'll take a look at it. I'm not going to save the water because I don't need any, but it'll be a lot darker than this. And then we'll fill this back up with cold water and then put the bandana back in, and that's all you have to do. Change the water at least once a day. Twice is even better, morning and night. And you'll know on each change the color will get progressively lighter and lighter, and when you get to the point that you're really not getting any color change in your water, you know your tannins have been leached out. So the way to test that is you open up the bandana, squeeze it out, open up the bandana, you'll have it'll look like dough in there, and just scoop some up on the end of your finger and taste it. If it's not bitter, you're good. If there's a little bit of bitterness or whatever, there's still tannins in there. Tannins are bitter, and so you want to soak for probably another day or whatever. So just let your eyes and your tongue be your gauge. And then once this is leached, then we're going to go and we're going to dry it out, and I'll show you how we're going to do that, and then we'll store it away. So that's all there is to it. It's very simple. Main thing is just remember to change that water. Once a day is good, two's even better, morning and night. And that's all there is to it. So I will see you here at the same spot in the morning. Stay tuned. Okay, here I got the bowl up on a shelf. Just one more thing that came to mind that I neglected to mention. If you're going to use a body of water, you'll want to tie that bandana off with some cordage, otherwise you're going to lose all your meal. So in a bowl you don't have that type of problem, but you just tie it off, and then you know, if there's a stream or whatever, you want to put it in a back eddy or something up near the bank, so it doesn't wash away, and then weight it down with rocks or whatever. But it's very important to tie it off, otherwise you'll lose all your the contents inside the bandana. So. Okay, it's the next morning, and getting ready to swap this and change this water out here. You can see how dark this is with the tannins. It's real easy to do. Just pull your material up. Just give it a light squeeze. You can see how dark the water is coming out of here. That in a bowl. That is really dark. That's a high tannin content there. So just rinse it out. We're going to drop our material back in here. You just do that once or twice a day, and it's probably going to take about 5, maybe 6 days. So we'll go ahead and we'll come back when we get this all leached out, and then we'll get into the drying process. Okay, it's been 6 days later, and this is what we have. I've been changing the water every day in the bowl, and the way you test it, when the water will look a little bit yellowish, And that's some of the fine material seeping through the fabric. But if you're not getting that bourbon color, that deep tea color, you can go ahead and taste it. So you just take a little piece, stick it in your mouth, move it around with your tongue, and let your tongue be your guide. If you don't taste any bitterness, you're good to go. And I just did that a little bit ago. So what we're going to do is, I've got a baking pan here. If you're in the wilds, you have to spread this stuff out. I mean, you even leave it on the bandana if you have to. Spread it out flat and move the material around so it gets thin. Put it in the sun, and you're going to have to babysit it because the squirrels and animals wind up eating it, but you can do it that way. Just spread it out nice and thin. Nice sunny spot. Keep an eye on it. And it doesn't take long at all to dry. And you want to make sure it's completely dry before you put it in a container. We're going to go ahead and throw this in here. It's really not that hard to do. Pretty simple. The finer you grind your material down, a lot of it on the bandana here. The finer you grind your material, the faster the leaching process will take. And what I'm going to do is, it's nighttime, I don't have the benefit of the sun, and I don't have time to babysit the materials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the oven with the oven door open about a third of the way, and put the oven on low. Remember, at 150 degrees the starch will cook, and we're trying to avoid that. But if it does cook, it doesn't ruin it. You can still use it as a food source. So if it does get a little hot, you don't have, don't panic. You didn't ruin your meal. And we'll put it on low. I'm going to keep the temp down and just let it dry. Stir it around a little bit as it's drying. I'm not going to put it into a container until it is completely dry. Being an organic material, it will mold. It'll go moldy on you very fast if you put it in something and it's not dry. I can tell by the looks of this, it came out really nice. This I'll put up here by the sink because that's going to get washed, and then I'll hang that up and let it dry. This came out really good. In the spring, when I head up to shoot some footage, I'll take this up. I'll have it already in a bag, and I'm going to enjoy some hot acorn cereal prepared over the campfire. Just kind of break it up, the chunks, and you don't want to pack it down. Just kind of leave it light and fluffy. Yeah, that came out really nice. That's a pretty decent amount, considering it wasn't a lot of acorns. So that will go in the oven, and it'll be in there for, I don't know, a couple hours probably. I'll open it up and I'll stir it around several times. I'm not going to document any of that. It's pretty self-explanatory. And once it's finished and I've got it in a bag, I'll go ahead and show everybody, and then we'll go ahead and conclude this this episode. So stay tuned. And I just washed this up, hand washed it in the sink, and you can see very easy to clean these up. The acorn, the little bit of meal that was on there comes right off, no problem. So I'll just hang this up and let it dry, fold it up, put it away in my kit for when it's needed next time. Alright, I'm back up here in my camp, and I was drying this in the oven. It's still not dry yet, and it looks like I've got carpenter ants trying to get in here. Alright, get out of here, buddy. There we go. Have it sitting over here in the sun, and it's still slightly damp, so it's got to be completely dry before it's placed in a container. It came out pretty nice. It's a decent little amount considering the amount of acorns that we started out with, but I can feel the dampness in here. So I'm just going to let it go ahead and keep drying, and I'm going to go ahead and conclude this episode instead of sitting around waiting for this to dry, because I'm currently involved in a few other projects. So well, I hope all of you enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it. Please like, subscribe, and share. If anybody has any questions whatsoever, just hit me up below in the comment box. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the acorn leaching or harvesting. I hope all of you are having an outstanding day or night, depending on where you're located, and I will see all of you very soon on the next one. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.